Today is World Heart Day and the theme for this year is cardiovascular health for everyone. Could you please elaborate about it?
Every year, World Heart Day, there is a theme for the general public and for the healthcare professionals, the policy makers. So the theme, as you have already mentioned, is cardiovascular health for everyone. Now, what do we mean by cardiovascular health for everyone? It is that we are this thing that is world where there are underprivileged countries, where there are privileged countries, where there are countries who have economically advanced a lot. Now we have to consider about health for everyone, cardiovascular health for everyone. This includes that the cardiovascular environment should be such so that these patients or individuals who are nationals of any nation, they should be benefited from cardiovascular health. Next is we should get apprised about what are the newer techniques that is coming up and what are the new procedures that are available so that we can give good cardiovascular health or a proper cardiovascular health care can be done not only at the grassroots level but also at the city level also. The third thing is that we all have a commitment as healthcare professionals to everyone so that there is an uniformity in cardiovascular health. For example, if you see about the vaccination program, it never saw who was poor, who was rich, but definitely in the same way, we try to see that every individual does get the benefit of cardiovascular health. And lastly, it is for the policy makers to see that they have to invest in cardiovascular health because we know cardiac diseases are the #1 mortality in the world. And in fact, India is the capital where diabetes, hypertension, all these are very high. So the incidence of cardiac diseases are very high. So we have to impress on our policymakers to invest on cardiovascular health. This is what we mean by cardiovascular health for everyone.
Sir, can you give us a couple of tips on what lifestyle changes one should inculcate on a daily basis for a good and a healthy heart?
See, for a healthy and a good heart, the mantra is very simple. Number one is that first you have to come out of the stress. That's the first thing. Everyone is under stress. Let it be a student, let it be an office goer, let it be a housewife, a homemaker, or let it be anyone. Stress plays a major role, and that is because of the stress. Let it be financial, let it be any aspect because of which we are seeing a spurt in the disease of cardiovascular diseases. That is the first thing. Now, how do you come out of the stress? There is nothing new that I have to tell you about how to come out of the stress. There are various ways how you have to de-stress yourself. That is very important. Next is that you have to put yourself on a heart healthy diet. What I mean by a heart healthy diet is that you have to put yourself low fats, low carbs, and try to see that you do not take unnecessarily fried foods which are harmful for the heart. The third thing that is most important is you have to spend some time daily doing some form of exercise, walking, whether you do yoga, you do pranayam, that is cycling, you do dancing, you do aerobics, everything has some form, you have to keep yourself active. The last thing which is most important is that smoking is exponentially increasing, and it has to be told and has to be highlighted to each and every individual, especially our younger mass, that you have to stop smoking because tobacco is the biggest harm causing substance which is being used by not only the younger but also the elderly population, whatever the form may be in form of cigarettes, BDs or tobacco or anything. And even the countryside people use a lot of tobacco. So these are certain things that we have to inculcate so that we can have a healthy heart. And lastly, one has to keep a regular check on themselves. For example, check your blood pressure, check your blood sugars, check your cholesterol levels so that you do not fall prey to these cardiovascular diseases.
Recently, WHO announced that COVID-19 pandemic has almost come to an end. Sir, what I want to understand is what has been the impact of COVID-19 on heart?
There is a very close, intricate relationship between COVID and the heart. Now, this virus, that is a COVID-19 virus, is notorious for causing clots in the blood vessels. Let the blood vessels be in the heart or in the periphery or in the hands, brains, anywhere. There is a tendency to blood to clot. So, as a result, what happens? These patients present with more heart attacks, more strokes, more limb ischemia, or that is difficulty of the limbs. All these things there has been a spurt. Now about the statement that WHO is telling that COVID is out. I don't think so, because still we are getting patients of COVID. So we should not let this thing loose, that we should not keep our masks down and not be careless and mix about, because we do not know any among us, one among us may be a COVID carrier and may spread it. So please do not go with the idea that COVID is out. It is now has become our lifestyle, and it is like a common cold now. It can come any day, even if you have had once, twice, thrice, it can recur also. So about this statement, I am a little bit reserved that COVID is not yet out. Daily you will see the charts that this district shows this many cases, that thing. So till it is like, it is not eradicated. You can just take preventive measures so that you do not get COVID. That's the whole thing. COVID has caused a lot of destruction in every family. It has taken away livelihood. It has taken away a lot of mortality of patients. So one has to be very careful so it doesn't strike back in a bad way again.
Sir, there are a lot of opinions on the internet about what oil to prefer, refined oil or olive oil or desi ghee. There are also opinions on eating egg white but not eating egg yolk, about good cholesterol and bad cholesterol. Sir, can you give us a brief idea on what to follow and what not to follow?
See, this oil part which I'd like to answer first is that actually if you'll see it is last around say 3 or 4 decades when these heart diseases started arising. In fact, our grandfathers and grandmothers never had this high incidence of heart disease during that time. But now you see the younger mass are getting more of heart disease. Now why is it so? One of the most responsible factor is the type of oil we use. Now there is a ratio, what we call as the saturated fatty acids, the monounsaturated fatty acids and the polyunsaturated fatty acids. Saturated fatty acids are harmful for the heart. Monounsaturated fatty acids and polyunsaturated fatty acids are good for the heart. Now there is normally a omega-6 to omega ratio in every oil. Now if you see, after these vegetable oils came into the market, that is like the sunflower oil, the safflower oil, these oils had a very high omega-6 to omega-3 ratio. The normal omega-6 to omega-3 ratio should be around 4 to 5. But this oil like sunflower and safflower have got a omega-6 omega-3 ratio something more than 150. So possibly after the market was flooded with these vegetable oils, we started consuming oils which were in fact toxic or notorious to cause more heart damage, and finally heart disease started rising. Around say 3 decades back, we never had these oils and we never had this problem. So one has to be very careful in choosing an oil. Now if you ask me what is the best oil for the heart, definitely one oil which almost fits the WHO standards is the rice bran oil. This rice bran oil comes from the rice husk which you throw away, and this rice husk oil is definitely good for the heart. Your question about taking ghee, definitely ghee as such contains a lot of saturated fats, but it contains a lot of antioxidants which is good for the heart. So you will see our rishis and munis used to take a lot of ghee, but they never used to have heart attacks. The thing is that ghee in a little bit just for the aroma can be used, or very little just for its property that it contains a lot of antioxidants is helpful. Lastly, about the egg yolk and the egg white. Definitely egg white is something which is encouraged because it is just protein. Egg yolk contains a lot of fat and should be avoided, especially for patients whose cholesterol is high, who have a sedentary lifestyle, who do not do regular workouts. It is better only to take the egg white.
So the next one is a personal question, and I get a lot of opinion from a lot of doctors. So from your perspective, your point of view, I want to understand that is it necessary for a doctor to get emotionally attached with his patient?
Very difficult question to answer, but in fact no. One should not get emotionally attached to the patient, because once you get emotionally attached to the patient, what exactly happens? If there is a loss of the life or if there is a loss in the family, then you feel that as if you are losing someone who is very close to you and is among yourselves. But at the same time, if you do not have some emotional attachment with the patient, then you do not do justice. Because if I see the patient as one of my brother or my sister or my father or my uncle, then I will do justice. So here comes the property or the aspect of being emotionally attached. But one should not get more emotionally attached, because treatment has its own place, emotions has its own place. So do not mix emotions with the treatment. If you mix emotions with the treatment, then you will never do justice. At the same time, I mean to say you should have a sympathetic attitude to the relatives so that they know that you are a part of the family, you are doing whatever is best, and the most important thing is tell the truth to the patients. Don't try to hide and don't give them a false hope. And there I think emotions will not come, because when you don't give a false hope and when you speak the truth that this gentleman is not going to survive, had a massive heart attack, I cannot do much. So the relatives get prepared that no, something bad is going to happen. At the end of the day, when you treat a patient and the patient dies, then definitely you also do have an emotional setback. But I personally feel a doctor should not get too much emotionally attached with the patient.
Sir, you have had decades of experience. What has been your most complicated or challenging case so far?
In fact, the most complicated, the most challenging cases that I would say are when a young person, say in the mid-40s, at the prime time when he is earning, the sole earning member in the family, has spent years of study and has started earning, that time he gets a heart attack. And he is in very bad shape. That time you personally feel, because all his wife, his children, everyone is outside the ICU thinking, hoping that the doctor will do a miracle. But believe me, this gentleman never had a lifestyle change throughout his life. He kept on partying, he kept on having fatty food, he kept on going to joints, he took alcohol, he never exercised, and then he suddenly had a heart attack. That is where you feel that supposing this gentleman doesn't die, what happens? There are a lot of people outside whose lives depend on this gentleman, and that is the most difficult part. And when this gentleman is not saved, that we think is the most difficult part. And especially once, even if they're saved, if they have a life like a crippled, that is a cardiac crippled patient, definitely it becomes very difficult for you to face the patient when they come to your chamber. So my difficult cases have been the younger masses who really get a heart attack, who may really struggle to survive, make them survive. I agree, a patient having a heart attack at the age of 70, 75 is acceptable. But a patient having a heart attack, say at the age of 30 or 35, is really very pathetic. And these are these cases that we are seeing days, almost 2 decades earlier we're seeing the cases what has been seen for previous generation of cardiologists.
From the doctor's perspective, sir, what is your diet like on a daily basis?
Well, you should have asked my wife what she prepares for me. But anyway, because it is I who take the food, so I will definitely like to answer it. I am mostly a vegetarian. I occasionally take non-veg. Among non-veg, I prefer only fish and egg white. These are the 2 things I fish. And once in a blue moon, maybe chicken or red meat, very, very rarely, unless when I go for a party or something outside. The second thing is I do not take any alcohol. That is mandatory, because alcohol in any form is bad for the heart. People have the idea a little bit of alcohol might be good. No, 0 alcohol. Number 3, no smoking. I don't smoke. 4th, yes, if you ask me do I exercise regularly, possibly not, because by the time I finish my work, it is almost quite late at night, I don't get time. But anyway, I try to keep myself busy in between, whatever little bit I can do. And I usually prefer to take low carb food, especially like chapatis, more of vegetables, and definitely fish, and maybe small amount of rice. And if the rice that I take is usually the brown rice I take, because it has been seen that the brown rice, what we call as the rice which is available in the rural areas, that rice is very good for the heart. So this is this thing that is diet in brief. And basically I'm a very small eater too, that's the whole thing. But about the oil, yes, no olive oil. Cooked olive oil is bad for the heart. You can take raw olive oil, definitely rice bran oil or the traditional groundnut or the mustard oil are the oils that to be used. No ghee, no butter, no margarine. These are certain principles I follow. Rest I leave it to God, what has to be done.
Sir, this is the last question that I want to ask you. Is red wine good for the heart?
See, red wine is not bad for the heart, because you will see the people in France have lesser incidence of heart attacks. The reason is that red wine contains a lot of antioxidants, and these antioxidants are good for the heart. So among all the alcohol drinks that you can say, among them wine is the only drink that can be permitted. That's the whole thing.
It was an absolute pleasure having a conversation with you, sir. Thank you for talking with Swasthya Sambad.
Namaste.